family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Mute myself.
Oh,
Came close.
we'll get it one of these times.
But the
And
volume
take
actually
two.
came down. I'm happy about it. Hello, this is the Unleashed AF podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We help you every single week to get unleashed from society's grip on your head. Yeah, how's that?
The vice grip.
My name is Deidre Beecham. I am the Visibility Catalyst. I help you to, get visible to the things that are keeping you back so that you can unleash yourself onto the world. And Jenny, my co-host.
And I'm Jenny Badig. I am calling myself an inner space engineer now because I think it best represents my experience and skill set, because between being a human factors engineer and a hypnotherapist for over 10 years, I know how to engineer the outside world. I've been engineering the inside world for people, helping them overcome things. And I love that we can bring that kind of information and awareness out to people in this podcast and help them just unleash themselves and become their best selves.
Awesome. And today we don't have a guest. We wanted to come to you and talk to you about what has been happening in the media lately. The first thing, it all started, I think it really kind of all started with the bear. The meme that went around about the bear.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of where this all started, because I think that's what made this even more in your face.
Yeah.
But, women were asked, who would you rather be stuck out in the woods alone with, a man or a bear? And overwhelmingly, women are coming back and saying bear. And it's caused quite an uproar, because there are some men that aren't listening and instead saying, no, the bear will eat you up, and not listening to the women's experience. And then on top of that, this happened this week. Harrison, now you helped me with the name,
Right.
because I was having a very difficult time remembering this man's name. And she said, it's easy. He's a kicker. So Kerr. And he's an ass. So Butt Kerr. I'm like, I've got it. Harrison Butt Kerr.
Right.
That helped me remember, and not to pick on somebody, that just helps me to remember. And but we are going to pick on him now. He said some very damaging things about women in the commencement speech. So go ahead, tell a little bit about what happened, Jenny.
Yeah, well, just to make sure that everybody's aware, because I know social media feeds are different for everybody. But
Sure.
yeah, that bear or man thing has been going around for a while, and there's a lot of discussion about it on both sides of the coin there. People trying to figure out, why would a woman choose a bear over a man? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. So if you haven't already seen that in your social media feeds, you can research that on your own. We're not going to dive into that a whole lot, but I agree. I hadn't thought about it, but that is probably why this was kind of a bigger
highlighted
spark.
because I'm sure, I'm sure it just made it even a bigger spark of fire.
Yeah, because actually, as I was reading a little more about it the other day, I saw that he basically made a lot of the same comments in the first commencement speech that he gave back in 2023 at at his alma mater, I think, or something in Georgia.
Tech, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Georgia Tech. His mother went to Emory, but he, I think, went to Georgia Tech. So it didn't spark a big thing when he said it then, but it's definitely hit a chord now. And, he's an NFL kicker, which I guess is interesting enough to make him someone that they would want as a commencement speaker for graduation. I'm not sure that typically qualifies someone to be a commencement speaker, but they asked him. I think the bigger qualification for him probably is that because of his platform, he has made it known to people prior to this that he is a devout Catholic, and he's very supportive of Catholic organizations and things like that. And this was a Catholic college, a small liberal arts Catholic college in Kansas, and he plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, that got him to come do the commencement address. So, the fact that he even started it by saying, my original thought was to say no to this because it's really not my lane.
It's not his lane.
Yeah.
Although he tells women to stick in their lane, but continue.
Yeah. Not his vocation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But he did it anyway. He got convinced to do it, and he may or may not be sorry that he agreed to do it at this point. I think, it seems like he's getting a lot of support from people in the Catholic community, the far right. So not just Catholics, but other kind of.
We get too much for people who aren't familiar with what he said. We probably at least share.
Oh yeah.
Exactly what he said.
Yeah, there were a few things, but yeah.
There were definitely
said a lot in 20 minutes.
But we should probably give at least a highlight.
Absolutely.
And he spoke directly to women. And after he said what he said to women, he got a standing ovation from the men in the room. Anyway, so he said, for the ladies present today, congratulations on your amazing accomplishment. And goes on to talk about how it's just so wonderful, all their accomplishments. But then he says, you've had the most diabolical lies told to you. And I'm with him. You have.
We thought.
How many of you sitting here are about to cross the stage thinking about all the promotions and titles that you're going to get in your career? Yeah, that's great. I'm sitting in the audience. This is all sounding great so far. Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world. Awesome. But I would venture to guess the majority of you, are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. And then he goes on to talk about his wife and talking about how her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and a mother.
And a homemaker. Right?
Yeah.
Didn't he use that
term?
Well,
in the end, he says, I met a girl in the back of the middle school, convert to my faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker. Which is just unbelievable. You're standing there in front of a group of women and men, of course, but he was talking to women. He said, this is for you. He was talking to the women in that room and said, everything you've done, you've been lied to. This is not important. Basically, you're not important unless you are a homemaker, really, because that's really the most important title.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, just the audacity.
Right. And as someone, you are a mother yourself. And so, when you hear that, what does that bring up for you?
It infuriates me because not everybody wants to have a child, and to be told that that's the most important thing. Do I love my children? Are they important to me? Of course. But to say that children are the be all and end all of everything you do is absolutely ridiculous and reduces women down to exactly that. Homemakers, baby makers. That absolutely reduces women down to that, and that we have no value. Obviously, we have no value outside of that because all of those titles are just meaningless, according to, I can't remember his first name now, but I know his last, Butker. Yeah.
Harrison.
Harrison.
Yeah. And I think, there's so much to unpack there, really. But the fact that he called it the most important thing. Well, if it was the most important thing, why wouldn't more men want to have that most important title or that most important role?
Yeah. And that's where it becomes problematic.
There's obviously, there's an implication of, it's the highest that you could ever achieve. The most important role you could ever hold as a woman. Well, we'll see about that.
Right. And then it puts forth also a supposition that if there's something wrong with you, if that is not what's most important to you, there's something wrong with you if that is not what you're looking forward to, if that's not what you're most excited about. You know, all
Right.
the thousands of dollars that you spent at this college, you really could have done without. I mean,
Yeah. You could have saved it
what
for
I heard.
diapers.
That's what I heard. And it is, and it's just, I'm not sure where that all comes from. Which, because we did some research, found out his mom is, she is on the faculty, on the staff at
At
Emory.
Emory. And she's a physicist and has
Yeah,
been
she's,
since I think the late 80s, which is before he
yeah,
was born. So
yeah,
like,
clinical medical physicist, Department of Radiation Oncology at Emory.
yeah.
And yeah, and so I'm not sure how that all gets justified, but you know, we could sit here and go on and on and on and on about all the horrible things he said, and he said a lot of horrible things. We may bring up some more, but I think it's really important because, you know, of course, the show is leash, bite, bark. At the end, we talk about that. You know, the leash that keeps you held down, and I think in this case, there's so many leashes that he touched upon in his presentation. And I
Yeah.
know we talked about patriarchy is certainly in there,
Yep.
religious systems.
Yeah.
What else did we
Yeah. I
talk
think
about?
based on the setting of it and the
Yeah,
audience that he had, to me, it feels like the religious doctrine is the biggest leash
sure.
because he was very clearly the entire talk
Oh, it was
referencing.
absolutely very, very much about doctrine.
Yeah, he was very much talking about really, and he did claim them as his beliefs, his understandings, based on his Catholic faith, and you know, as far as he is in it, he's full on. He's drank the entire pitcher of Kool-Aid, and he's in
Mass
like
producing it.
up to here. Which, you know what, if that's his choice, obviously
It
we
is his
have
choice.
freedom of religion. He can
But when
choose
he
to live that
stands
way.
up on a stage, and tells women, this is what's most important, and a college has paid him to put him on stage, I think it's reprehensible that that college accepted money from those women if they're going to hire somebody to come on stage and say, your accomplishments mean nothing in comparison to being a homemaker. That
Yeah.
college should give their money back. I think it's
Ooh,
reprehensible.
that's some
my opinion.
reparations right there. Yeah.
That's
Because
insane.
we're
'Cause you have
obviously
the
quite
college telling you.
sure. Well, and I'm sure that they knew what he was going to say, right? I mean, they're not just going to let somebody go up there and not have a pre-approved speech.
Yeah, at the
So
very least, anytime I've had some sort of a keynote, you have to at least give an outline. You may not have to give your entire speech, but you have to at least give an outline. They knew what he was gonna say,
yeah.
and they were
And the
happy
thing
with that.
is, probably part of the reason that they asked him, like I said, is because he's made it very well known. It's not like they asked him because he's an NFL player. I don't even know that school, I guess it maybe has a football team, but it's not like a big football school. So it was very much because of his religious beliefs, and it's a Catholic school. So I think, and the fact that he got a standing ovation from the men in the audience and probably some women because they're
Yeah,
there.
my understanding is that one of the women there, I listened to her do a video, and she was talking about how she was there, she was listening to it, she couldn't believe she had spent, you know, all this money and time, and here's this person telling her that none of it matters. She says men around there was clapping, and eventually stood up, gave him a standing ovation, clapped for 18 seconds after he addressed just the women.
Mhm.
And she said she booed but was completely drowned out. And yeah, and that's just a little I think it's disturbing. To me, it's disturbing.
Mhm.
And it's disturbing that he was able to say these things at Georgia Tech and nothing happened back then, and so much that he's been hired again. But yeah, so we think, or I know that as soon as I heard this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a big bite for somebody, and maybe many women, probably
Mhm.
many of the women that were sitting there in the audience that day. If they hadn't made adjustments to what they surrounded themselves with and what they did in their life and how they thought, I certainly hope they're doing it now.
Yeah.
because that's quite a bite first for a man to be hired and then tell you that what you've just accomplished is meaningless.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is interesting or important about that is when you're in that mindset, the people that stood up, I don't think they were standing up to be like, yeah, you women, we're putting you down. They're so engulfed in that patriarchal belief system that's sewn or woven throughout the
Yeah, it's
Catholic
completely
doctrine.
ingrained within the doctrine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Catholic, so I'm aware of some of the, teachings.
Yeah.
And I was able to, pull myself out of it once I got into college, actually, and I had my eyes open to a lot of the hypocrisy and things like that. Just didn't work for me anymore. And so hopefully this kind of thing will help open the eyes to some of the women that were there, or just women that are hearing it in general, not necessarily that they were at that particular graduation ceremony. But yeah, I mean, I really believe that I'm sure most of the men that were standing up, in their minds, they have it justified that yes, women who take care of our children at home so that we can go off and do whatever we want are wonderful. Yes, they deserve our praise. And they're patting themselves on the back for standing up and clapping for women.
Yes.
And they
Yeah,
don't
they
even,
see it as a
they're not even
positive thing.
aware of the undertone of what that was saying to some women.
Mhm.
So it's just,
Yeah, and
because
again, and I am and please, we are not saying, "Hey, if that's what you want, if you want to go and, not you wanted to have your education because you wanted to have your education, great, and you weren't planning on using it, great. If you weren't planning on using it and you were gonna go out and have a child, get married and have a child, great, good for you." But for the women in that room who worked hard and were planning on using it, and then to be told that's worthless and that you've been lied to and you have no worth outside of being a baby maker,
Mhm.
that's what I have a problem with. And I think that we both have a problem with that.
Yeah. And I think another interesting aspect of what he said was and that makes you aware that he's not even aware of what he's really saying and what it means to women, some women. He actually quoted a Taylor Swift song at one point.
That's right.
And the song, I mean, he quoted it because obviously one of his teammates, Travis Kelce, is dating Taylor Swift right now.
Uh-huh.
So he tried to like pull that in because, it's popular. Everybody knows about it. But so he quoted her song, and I can't remember the title of the song that he quoted. And Swifties everywhere will be like, I'll get hate mail probably. But the song, like many of her songs, is all about being empowered and a woman being independent and being able to take care of herself. So he's quoting that song while he's putting women down, really. And like he doesn't see, I don't think they see what they're saying or how that affects people. Because they're so indoctrinated into, well, this is just how it is. This is how God wanted it. This is how we have to be in order to be. Oh, and I was confused before. I thought he was saying in order to become saints, but he said in order to achieve salvation. So in order to, from his teachings or from his understandings, to be able to go to heaven or, attain salvation at the end of your life,
Mhm.
you must live by these teachings very specifically and very, without fault, without wavering or whatever. So that's the belief system. That's the road he's on. And I did see there was another, I think it was a Kim Stafford or something, another football player's wife who is a stay-home mom. She, he makes plenty of money, so she doesn't have to work. She's choosing to stay home and take care of their kids. And
Yeah.
she had issues with his speech. And she said, there are plenty of people who do choose that route, but there are also plenty of people that don't for a variety of reasons. And, that contribution that they make should not be discounted. So she could see kind of both sides of it, what he was saying, and he's trying to suggest or encourage the route that she's ended up taking. But she's like, this was just my choice. There are plenty of other women out there that make a different choice that have wonderfully
Yeah, and
productive lives. And that's the
personally, I
point.
didn't see it as encouraging. I saw him as saying this is the way. But But again, like you said, that's part of the religion.
Yeah.
But for women who aren't a part of that religion and don't want to be a part of that doctrine and don't want to live their lives that way, this can be very triggering.
Hmm.
A bite, if you will,
Yeah.
into, oh my gosh, I need to kind of wake up and change part of my life. So,
Hmm.
um, how do we help women? What do we say to women who listen to Butker's speech and it triggered them in some way? Um,
Well, I think part of the, social media can be a blessing and a curse. But one of the nice things about social media is it has given people an opportunity to find community, to find others that have that felt that same bite, basically. And so they
mhm.
know they're not alone. They know it's not as confusing when you know there's other people out there talking about the same feelings you're having about it, having the same kind of angry reactions to it or whatever. So finding community in like-mindedness is, I think, one of the best things that can happen, at least initially, to help you from feeling like, well, is there something wrong for me for thinking differently? I mean, he has this platform, I'm just sitting
It
here.
gives
I'm
you the
not
need to
being
be a part
blasted
of it.
all over YouTube.
Mhm.
Yeah. So being able to find that community, and it doesn't have to be through social media, obviously, but because this is being, you know, played and it's gone viral on the internet, social media is kind of the easiest way to address it and have comments about it and stuff like that. And I've just seen, that's the first thing. I hadn't even seen anything about the speech until a couple of days of watching the different memes and comments go back and forth by people that were enraged by it. So I found the community
Well,
before I
and
even
then,
got bit.
and I have to say there was a meme that went around, um, and it said that it was him clearing up the story,
Hmm.
and it was even harsher than the presentation was. Turns out that was all false,
Yep.
because it made me livid. I was bringing it to the table. I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring this,"
Yep.
and it was, it was false. There were people that were trying to
Stir it up.
stir it up and stir up more anger. So yeah, I completely agree. Is finding community that helps you to understand you are definitely not alone, and and some sanity. I know I feel that way with Colbert. When I listen to Colbert, I feel like, oh my gosh, he's part of my community. But yeah, I think it's really important to find people that think like you and can help you on your way.
Hmm.
But I think another part of that is slowing down. It's so easy to get all charged up and focus on him and his statements. I mean, we did for the first half hour of the show. We focused on them. Um, but at some point, you have to focus elsewhere, and in order to push forward and move past things that are triggering you, it's important to look inside yourself and go, what isn't healed? If this is so triggering for me, what isn't healed inside of myself that I keep thinking about this? How can I think about moving forward and future objectives? And a lot of that is slowing down and figuring out what's going on inside of me. Why is this so upsetting? What am I not letting go that this is so upsetting for you
Yep.
personally?
Hmm.
Um, I think that's one of the things that can be very, very helpful. Listening to, just as community helps you with this, but listening to positives on the other side, some of the responses that I've seen have just been absolutely amazing. People saying, yeah, he said this, and this is how this showed up in my life, and this is why I'm not this way anymore. This is why I don't
Yep.
agree with this anymore. And finding those things, because sometimes if you can't find that community, you can at least find the community in the memes until you have that community around you.
Hmm.
Changing your personal algorithm, if you will, what
Right.
flows into your head.
Yeah. And certainly, I think one thing that I'm called to a lot for situations like this is something that can incorporate humor. That's where I start to shift from being triggered to being able to laugh about it or, move on because it points out the absurdity of some of it. And that's even something, you know, this about me. Um, Several years ago when I was working at a corporation, there were just different things, office politics and stuff going on that had people stressed. And so I decided, for whatever reason, it, like, I either heard a song or reminded me of a song when somebody said something. And so I wrote this whole parody to a song that poked fun at whatever the situation was that everybody was stressed about. And then I shared it with the people that knew what was going on and they loved it. So sometimes if we can, you know, just have that opportunity, like that shift or the a switch we can throw where we go, oh wait, this angry energy or this hurt energy, it's now turning into, I'm gonna have to laugh about it. So that's one way to deal with it, not the only way,
No,
but
certainly not.
certainly one way to shift the energy. Certainly if you're laughing about something, you're not as mad as it, you know, it's not the same kind of hot, angry energy when you're
Well,
laughing.
and I'm really glad you brought energy up because that entire and we talked about this yesterday when we tried to go live yesterday.
It was our own
About this
private
topic.
life.
Our private live. But that the energy of that entire commencement speech was very low energy. It was all about control and shaming. It was
Oh yeah.
shaming the church. It was shaming people in the church. It was shaming the men. It was shaming the women. It shamed everybody. And
Shamed the
so that
president.
and yeah,
It's
shamed the president, shamed members of the LGBT community, called Pride Month a month of sin. So there are so many things were very, very low energy.
yeah.
And if you feel shame about any of those things, or you haven't worked through any of your own issues, anything that he says can just really blow up for you.
Yep.
Yeah. And so changing the energy is one of the ways. And so I'm so glad you brought that up. So you can listen to high vibration music, positive, affirming mantras. There's so many things you can do, but one of the things is taking the energy out of your attention being on him and the things he said, and instead about you and how you move forward
Yep.
in the world.
Yeah. And sometimes if those types of things that are just sort of more, I don't know, maybe on the surface, like it's just a song or it's just a funny meme or whatever that tries to get you to laugh, if that doesn't feel like enough, that's when you need to see if you can find some more specific or one-on-one or private type of help, whether it's going to a therapist, a coach, talking to a good friend or mentor. Like, just if it feels like things, you're not finding enough stuff that's just available out there, you know, whether it's on the internet or just in your community, then keep pushing, keep trying to find what is going to help you. And just not giving into it or succumbing to the feelings or to the frustration or whatever, because it's only going to kind of become a downward spiral. Other things are going to happen. And it's just like, you know, you got to figure out a way, keep going until you find a way to shift that energy. It's really important, I think.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that gets left out so many times, and this is a personal observation from my experience when I was going to church, is that in very, very subtle ways, women are told that they're less than. And coming out of church, I know for myself, I had just in a lack of a sense of self, because everything is about other people. At least for women, we are told that we are last. So it's God, your husband, and then like your children, and then you. And it's not important for you to know who you are outside of you being a mother. It's not important for you to know anything about your side outside of being a wife. It's not important. None of those things are important. And so leaving that, and I'm obviously not all churches, relax. That is a lot of religious doctrine. And that happens in a lot of churches.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's important to me that that's what angers me when I see something like this, because I know that there are women like me who were affected by those things, and I want this to be, instead of being affected and downtrodden by this, going, hey, this is a wake up call. This is a wake up call for you to realize you are so much more powerful than you think you are, so much more powerful, and you have so much more control over your life and your future than you've been told. And so, yes, those have been diabolical lies. You don't have control.
Mhm.
You have been fed diabolical lies. And but it doesn't have to be that way, and you can start telling yourself the truth.
Right. Yeah. And as you said that about how the hierarchy structure of importance in religion, it made me think of even like the sign of the cross is Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's no woman in there. Like, where was Mary? Why didn't she, if that was the most important role, that she be the mother of Jesus, or, like, why wasn't she part of that combination? Because they didn't want any woman to see that they could be at that level of importance or power. Because wouldn't have happened without her. you can't you can't deny that it wouldn't have happened without her. Like, that was,
Mhm.
she's definitely part of that equation, but they didn't want to
Yeah.
show her.
No, no. So, yeah. So I think so. We've got the leash, which is a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Patriarchy, religion, and gosh, toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Um, and then we've got the bite, which is certainly the speech, and the things that were being said, and bark. So, what kind of bark would you like for women to be thinking about as a result of coming out of this?
Well, I think, part of what we were saying before with, if you feel like that doesn't resonate for you, if that message doesn't work for you, it feels uncomfortable, or you just don't vibe with it, then don't sit in it. Go out
Yeah,
and look for your community, go out and look for places that do recognize and appreciate you, opportunities that would recognize and appreciate you. It's overall, as women, I was going to say, go ahead and have yourself a career. But as I thought about, my career as an engineer, as a female engineer, there weren't a lot of female engineers above me in the in the hierarchy either. So there's still some work to be done there. But the more we go out and fill those positions and fill those roles, and kind of move the glass ceiling or break through glass ceilings, the less we have to worry about, oh, there's really nowhere for me to go to really feel like I fit in, or like I can really achieve everything I need to achieve. There's plenty of female CEOs out there in certain industries. So it can be done. It's happening. And so it's just about finding the people that you do vibe with, that support how you feel, because it's an inside, like you typically say, it's an inside job.
hmm it is.
You got
Visibility
to
is
get
an
your
inside
insides
job.
right.
And you brought up something that triggered something I talked about yesterday, which is trusting your gut. And so that's what I would
Yep.
want to tell women, is that if you are in a situation where you are being triggered, or somebody is telling you something, this is the way it is, and your gut is telling you no, listen to your gut. Listen to your gut. Your gut knows. Your gut knows even when your head is trying to tell you something different because you've been told so. And I wish more women were raised to trust their gut instead of trusting outside of themselves and looking outside of themselves for validation. And can I do this? Well, I don't know. So and so says I can't. What? If you think you can, if you are getting a gut instinct that you can, or you can do, or this is something that's exciting for you, or this is where you want to go, and you've got that degree and you've been dreaming about being a doctor, go do that if that's what's in your gut. So follow
Absolutely.
your gut. I mean, I wouldn't have been molested if I had followed my gut. It's so important for women to understand we have this incredible breadth of knowledge that isn't in our heads but is in our gut. And all people
Yeah.
do.
Mhm.
People have it. And it's just a matter of slowing down and paying attention and thinking and believing that that is more important. That's more important because that's part of loving you. And you can't love other people if you don't love yourself enough. We just have so many women that are hurt. Men are hurt too. I get that.
Mhm.
But we are the oppressed side of this, just like Black people have been oppressed for centuries by white people. There are systems that just have to be taken down, but trusting your gut and standing up for what's right is going to be a huge part of you healing.
Yeah. And even beyond the systems that are out there in society, there's also just how we're raised, right? In a lot of families, when
Yeah.
you're a kid, you're encouraged to not follow your gut, right? Which is probably part of what you were saying in terms of you probably wouldn't have been molested if you had followed your gut. As a kid, you
Yeah.
know who you feel comfortable around and who you don't feel comfortable around.
But so many times, and this is especially true, there are some families that are horrible for this, but especially in religious families, because what
Mhm.
happens is you take your kids to church. Oh, "Oh, look, Jimmy, come hug me," and the kid's like, "Oh, I don't wanna." Go over and you hug, you be loving. You be
Yeah.
loving, Jimmy.
Yeah.
And the kid is taught, male or female, they're all taught, especially women, because we're supposed to be nice. Women are taught that it doesn't matter what you think or feel. You are gonna go hug so and so. And so we are immediately taught, don't trust your gut,
Mhm.
and you need to go and give physical contact to whoever says you have to.
Mhm.
Anybody that you respect. So that's your parents. So your parents tell you need to go hug so and so, then you have to go hug them. And then you're told all the time, respect your elders, respect your elders,
Mhm.
respect your elders, respect your elders. So now
Mhm.
you have an older man come and touch you and you can't say anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Even though your gut is screaming. And so it's horrible the way we raise children. And I'm so proud of this next generation. I've seen this with my kids. With my son, my younger son, he has my grandchild, my granddaughter, and has a grandson on the way. And him and his wife are raising their children. And I'm getting way off topic here. They're
No, but let me
raising.
point out, I didn't know it was gonna be a grandson on the way. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I have a grandson on the way.
I
He
knew it
was
was a
born in
baby, didn't know it was a
October.
grandson. That's awesome.
Yeah. So the level of conscious parenting, it's just so beautiful. And I know not everybody's doing it, but I'm really hoping this spreads.
Mhm.
Because the conscious parenting is so much more aware as of the child as an individual, and helping that child to be aware of how do they regulate their nervous system? How do they understand what's right and what's wrong? How do they understand how to operate in the world? And they're taking her out into nature every day and helping her to ground herself. I mean, this is just so beautiful, this type of parenting, and I'm just
Mhm.
absolutely loving it, loving
Yeah,
watching it. And,
yeah.
I'm gonna be, me and my wife, her grandmas are gonna be right there helping her to trust her gut. Let me tell you, we will have
Mm.
conversations about trusting her gut and loving herself and taking care of herself and,
Yeah.
being the spunky kid that she is right now and continuing that on into adulthood. Because I think every single one of us had that when we were kids, and it
Mhm.
just got torn away from us.
Yeah. Yeah, even to the extent of, a lot of kids have what, an imaginary friend or, kids are probably more in touch with even things like the spirit world, the spirit realm, but they're
Absolutely.
told, that, "Well, I don't see anything. That's just imaginary. That's not real." When
Mhm.
it may have been very real. It's just not as accepted by a lot of people, so it's kinda squashed, and then you stop believing it, and then you don't sure what that like, when you hear that voice, "Well, what's that voice about?" I was told that's not real, so you don't
Yeah.
pay
And then we
attention
get
to
out
it
of touch
anymore.
with our intuition.
Right,
Mhm.
right. It's
All of
I
that
think
is to strip us from intuition, creativity, self-care.
Yep. Yeah, it's very difficult, I think for a lot of people to differentiate their intuition from just fears and ego. Right? Because
Oh,
sometimes you
absolutely.
get that nudge to like, "Oh, no, don't do that," but it's ego that's pushing you not to do it, not your intuition.
And
So it's
because we've been
hard
taught
to
to pay attention to ego and not to pay attention to intuition,
right.
it makes it very difficult. I remember the first time I was told about intuition, I was like, "What is that?" How do you tell the difference between that and the thoughts that are in your head? And it was
Right.
very, very, very difficult for me to slow down enough
Yep.
and to release enough trauma that I could begin to pay attention to my intuition again and understand and trust my gut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think meditation is one way, certainly,
Huge, yeah.
that can be helpful in doing that. It may not work for everyone, but that's definitely a big way I think a lot of people start to learn how to figure that out. Um, whether it and we've talked about this a little before, I think. We may have talked about it last week, and we were talking about, like, when I was interviewing you, that it's difficult to meditate at first, and there's different ways of meditating. Right? And that's what you had to
Yeah.
kind of find was the way that was right for you, that worked for you so that you could kind of get to that level and find out, like really figure out what is my intuition and what's
Mhm.
just the, craziness going on that I can't shut up or
Well, and
whatever. I
that's
can't
the
stop.
big thing is, everybody and William Butner is a Buck no, wait,
Harrison
Butner
Butker.
Butker Butker is part of what happened is that, and I just it's gone. It was there, and then it just disappeared, and that just happens. So I don't know. Just have no idea where I was going. It is so far gone.
It's all right.
So we'll just move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about meditation and how to figure out what your intuition is.
Yes, and so everybody here's where I was going. And so just like people try to tell you, this is how you do a morning routine, or this is how you meditate. This is how this happens. And uh, Buck Butker is up there telling you this is how you need to be. So no, there are many, many ways to meditate. There are many, many, many different ways to do just about anything you can think of. There are different ways to do it.
Yep.
And if it's not working for you, don't keep beating yourself up with the head, which is what I have been famous for doing in the past, because I just thought, well, if this doesn't work for me, there's something wrong with me. If it's not working for you, just find a different way.
Yeah.
It just means that way is not working for you. It's
Yep.
just wrong for you. It doesn't mean you're wrong or there's anything
Yep.
wrong with you. It just means that is not right for you. And that's a different way of looking at it.
Right.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. And I think when you really think about just how vast the world is and the fact that we have way more access to different types of cultures and societies and belief systems and information and all of that now, especially through the internet and, like I said, social media, stuff like that, there's so many options out there. Before we had access to all that, it felt very restrictive, right? Because if you couldn't find, especially if you're kind of stuck in a family that's not acknowledging what your struggles are or what you need, it was
Mhm.
hard to find a community that you felt comfortable in, because that was your
Yeah, sure.
community, your hometown, your school, your family. That was kind of all you had. It was tough to find something else. But now it's like, man, the world's your oyster, and there's so much diversity out there that like I said earlier, just keep going, keep looking for it until you find something that fits. That's part of the beauty of it, I think, is that there are solutions out there for everybody. And on the other side of that, I think part of why a lot of these more traditional or older doctrines, not just in religion, but even in some governments, in some corporations, I mean, it shows up in a bunch of places where the people that are in power, that have some influence over other people, try to keep them in like silos so that they don't look outside of that for some other solution. Easier to control when they're in
Mhm.
this herd, which is where the
Yeah.
whole thing about sheep comes in. But
Mhm.
when you have people in that little bucket or that silo and they don't see that they can look somewhere else for answers, much easier to control and keep under your influence. So it happens, the example that we kind of started with this week started with a religious, a speech given to a
Undertone, yeah.
religious community, but it shows up in so many different ways.
Yeah,
And
it does.
so many people think that they're kind of trapped in their job because, well, if I speak up, if I say something to my manager about this, I could get fired. Or, they think they're safe in their job as long as they do what they're supposed to do and what they're expected to do. They can get laid off the next day.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
perception of safety.
it's a
It's not really.
self-fulfilling prophecy. If it's, I hate my job, this is all horrible, it's going to continue to be like that as long as you think that. My life is horrible, it's going downhill. Well, as long as you think that it's going to be. So yeah, absolutely, self-fulfilling prophecy. That's a whole nother show.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Talk about that.
Just showing like all these things do have connections. It's not that this is an isolated situation. This is just one example of how those kinds of control mechanisms and kind of what was it you used AI to actually analyze?
Oh yeah, I
his
put
speech,
I
right?
put his speech, and not the whole speech. I only
Right.
put the 2 paragraphs about the women
Mhm.
and the 2 paragraphs where he specifically addressed the men, because he did
Mhm.
that in the speech. And then I asked ChatGPT, let me go back up here. I said, please analyze and not only summarize, but pick out the more obscure underlying messages. And then I gave ChatGPT the messages. And then this is what it said. It says the speech you provide is layered with overt and subtle messages that convey a particular worldview. And then it gave a detailed analysis. Speaker congratulates young women. Yeah, we know. But it congratulates them for their distinct societal roles. For women, the emphasis on the vocation of wife and motherhood as being the pinnacle of life achievements. For men, the message centers on reclaiming traditional masculinity and fulfilling responsibilities in the home, leaning into their roles despite societal pressures. It also shares personal anecdotes to reinforce points. Great. Underlying messages for women. Traditional gender roles. Family is much more important than career. It's going to take your sacrifice and support for your man to be successful. And then, of course, religious undertones. And for the men, the necessity of masculinity, of being stable, cultural critique, just criticizing the heck out of anybody that wasn't a part of the movement, purpose and duty. But then it says, here are some obscure underlying messages.
Mhm.
That there's conditional worth. There's an implicit message that women's worth is somewhat conditional on their roles instead of their achievements. Gender complementarity. The speech advocates a complementary view of gender roles where men and women have distinct non-overlapping roles that together create a balanced society. It's subtle criticism of feminism by elevating traditional roles, subtle criticism of feminist movements that advocate for gender equality, and for, of course, religious endorsement of roles. That they are not just societal preferences, but that they are divinely endorsed. This is ChatGPT. This has no feelings, like you were saying yesterday.
Right.
You go ahead and you say what you were saying yesterday, because I thought that was fascinating.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at some of the responses, like I said, in social media with women who are having emotional responses to this, and they're seeing like this is what they're getting out of that talk. Like I said earlier, the men that stood up and applauded him, I don't think even are aware of these undertones. They're not even aware that they're part of their belief system. But women absolutely have seen this. Most women, maybe not everybody. But this is ChatGPT is able to pick those out without even having any kind of triggers.
That's right. No
things that have
triggers.
happened to it. Like it's still even obvious to artificial intelligence that doesn't have emotional triggers that's really the underlying message that was coming across there. So
yeah,
I mean,
so if you got triggered by Butker, if you got triggered by his speech, it was, ChatGPT was too. So it's not, you're not being overly emotional or any of those things. That is a
Right.
logical response because there were overt and subtle and covert implications in that presentation.
Yep.
So stay strong. Let's do it. Oof.
Right. Keep moving forward. Find your community. Trust your gut.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we have next week, we're going to do this right. We've sat down, we have figured out how to make all the buttons work so we don't miss another episode. So next Friday, we will definitely be on time and live, 3:00 Friday Eastern Standard Time on our YouTube channel as well as our Facebook.
Are we
business page.
standard or daylight now? I don't remember
don't
what's what. But anyway,
Eastern. New York.
Yeah.
Pick a New
I
York
get that
time.
confused all the time.
That's what we do. We're not in New York, but that's what you pick.
Right.
So anyway, so thank you so much for being here. Was there anything else we wanted to add before we go?
We do have a new page up on our website. If you go to unleashedafpodcast.com, we have a couple of new pages, actually. One where you can submit. We have a little feature. We haven't really talked about it much on the pod yet, but we came up with this idea for like WWJDD, and it would be what would Jenny and Deidre do? Yeah. So that page is up on our website now where you can submit either a suggestion for a topic for one of the podcasts
or a question. You have something where you're stuck.
Yep. If you feel like, man, I know my leash, like listening to the podcast, I've identified a leash that I've got, but I have not figured out how to unleash myself yet. Help me out. And we'll do our best to, figure out ways to give you information or get in touch with you or find someone that we can bring on to the podcast that will have good information on how to unleash from that sort of situation. So that's a way that anybody can interact. You could also just use, I haven't double checked to make sure that WWJDD isn't already used for something else, but I doubt it. You could use in social media, do hashtag WWJDD, and we can check on that and see if there's questions coming in that way. And then there's also a page on the website. If you feel like you have a story that you'd like to share about something that has held you back, something that's had you leashed, and want to share with people how you've unleashed yourself or the types of systems or tools or environments that helped you become unleashed, there's a application to be a guest on our show, on our podcast. So you can fill that out there and we can get in contact with you and figure out, how it makes sense to work into the schedule of the podcast. So those things are up on our website now.
Yeehaw.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you taking care of that. I really do.
No problem.
All right. Well, let me see. Let me get back over here because we still have a bunch of buttons to push to get out. So we're going to fix that as well. But thank you so much for tuning in with us. We truly, truly hope that you take these things to heart, find ways to get yourself unleashed, because you can create a ripple just by you making some changes. It changes everybody around you. And it will be an amazing place if we could just keep doing that and get ourselves in power. So thank you so much. This has been Deidre Beacham. My website is, let's do that. Let's do that. Where is that? On my website. Woo! Yep. There's my website, DeidreBeacham.com. Then we also have Jenny's hypnohuddle.com.
Yep.
And we go hide. Oh, there we go. We need a little assistant over here pushing all these buttons.
We'll get there one day.
We'll figure it out. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will see you. Oh, let's get some music on. We'll see you next week, next Friday.
That's right. To live up to others' expectations, family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that